Here we go, Rob Mahoney. It's a game we're calling What Happens If ... So we're going into the future after any of the rounds, round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4.
Yeah, how far in the future do you want to go?
I want to go, we'll stop like late June is the end of the future. There's no flying cars yet or anything.
No,
We're just
no
going,
Kawhi with a foot-long beard on his deathbed someday.
No,
and need to
he's
figure
not
out.
Kawhi on the Castaway Island, nothing like
Okay.
that. Well, Kawhi is our first one. What if Kawhi can't pull off being healthy in round 1 and we do this again and the Clippers lose again?
Yep.
And Kawhi plays, it's a 6-game series and Kawhi plays 3.5. And there's mystery around it the whole time. And yet they just extended him. And there's a new arena coming. And the Clippers, who had that stretch for 2 months, were like, there's 3 teams that can win the title. The Celtics, the Sixers, and the Clippers, and Nuggets, or 4 teams. What happens?
Well, I mean, for one, I think we can't put enough punctuation on the first part of that, which is the Clippers lose this series definitively very quickly. If he's not a part of it, he's their only chance to even be competitive against the kind of two-way play that the Mavericks have been putting out lately. So if Kawhi is not healthy, the Clippers lose. If the Clippers lose in that fashion, and Kawhi, again, has this persistent issue where he can't stay healthy consistently, where he can't really be the centerpiece of a team in that way, I think the conversation around him starts to shift. And it wouldn't be an indictment of who he can be in big games. It's who can he be as a franchise centerpiece? Who can he be as a part of the Clippers' future? And how do we even conceptualize a player like him if he wants to hang around in that sort of situation? If he is the centerpiece of a team that persistently underachieves or doesn't go where it's supposed to go, what does that mean about him?
Yeah. Well, and then what do you do if you're Paul George? You've already made a shitload of money.
Yeah.
You live in LA where you're from.
Notably not extended, Paul George.
Not extended, Paul George.
Conspicuously not extended.
You have teams that have crazy cap space, including the Orlando Magic, who are really good.
Yep.
The Philadelphia 76ers, who have Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. Or you could stay in the Clippers, you get one more paycheck, and you're playing with James Harden and broken down Kawhi and a bunch of expensive role players. Then it comes down to what's important to you. The Clippers could probably pay a little more, but
yeah,
this is just crazy to me that we're now in the mid 2020s and we're still doing this with Kawhi and the Clippers. This is how the decade started. This is how the decade is going. And nobody at the Clippers seems to even know if he's 100%.
And that's where we're starting from too. Like the one thing we didn't unravel there is, let's say he even stays healthy for the first series. I don't think anyone is thinking of the Clippers as a team that could last multiple rounds in the playoffs. And that was the whole premise of this group to begin with, is this is one of the surest contenders, given their talent, that you're going to find in the field. And they're not anywhere close to that anymore.
Yeah, there's this world where OKC could luck out. Like the Clippers could somehow beat Dallas in this one.
Oh, yeah.
And then, Kawhi is on borrowed time at that point with what his health has been. And now OKC might be able to get the Clippers with a compromised Kawhi.
Yep. And then does Kawhi drop out of the Olympics at that point?
Right.
Or does he go to Paris anyway and just kind of hang out? I don't know. Jalen Brunson goes instead. Jalen Brunson and Joel Embiid hit it off. They might need one.
All right, we're taping this on a Thursday, so this is still relevant. What happens if New Orleans loses the play-in game?
I mean, don't they have an excuse at this point?
What about the part where Brandon Ingram just got benched in the fourth quarter of a must-win game against the Lakers, and the team played better without him? Like, I think he's one of the most realistic trade pieces this summer for a variety of reasons that include it really feels like it became Zion's team over the last 2 months. Trey Murphy, how many advanced stats can be incredibly favorable to him at this point? I don't know. Is he like the advanced stats MVP?
He's among them. He's Trey Murphy, beloved, really good player. But you said something there like that it felt like Zion's team over the last few months. I think that's definitively true. Watch the Pelicans play over the back part of the regular season. It shifted notably. But it wasn't Zion's team in the last 3 minutes for the same reason it's not been Zion's team for the majority of his stay there. And that's what makes the Ingram question so hard. And what makes him especially a less than ideal running mate for Zion, just on the grounds that he also gets hurt a lot. And part of the reason he played badly is he's also coming back from an injury. And so whatever you may think about the fit of those guys or what kind of team you could build around them or what their future could be, just by the fact that they both cannot stay healthy, I think is a huge problem that probably needs to be resolved sooner than later.
And they have 1 million picks. So this is, hey, Mikal Bridges. Hey, Nets, are you sure you don't want to trade Mikal Bridges? What if we offered you Ingram and a couple picks and moved it your way? It could also go the other way. They could win the play-in game.
Yes.
Without Zion. Be like, look at Brandon Ingram. What a redemption. On Wednesday, he's benched. On Friday, he's the hero. Next one. We're bringing in Dame Time. Bringing in my Dame Time bobblehead that I bought for the playoffs on eBay. They had Dame Time the other night, and I had to get a bobblehead. It's got a little watch on the bottom of it, and Dame's looking at his watch in the bobblehead and kind of nodding at it.
Yeah.
What happens if it's not Dame Time in round one? What if the clock just never starts moving and Dame Time? I think both you and I feel like this might be where we're headed with round one with Milwaukee, but what happens then? Is the market still the same? Do you run it back? Do you say, weird year, multiple coaches, Giannis got hurt? Or do you say this didn't work?
I think you get another big Giannis speech about the meaning of failure and success in life.
Does he have another one? The first one was so well crafted.
It was quite well crafted, but he's got a little time to workshop it just in case, just have it prepared in the pocket, ready to go. But I think we are going to hear a lot of the explanation. Giannis hurt, as you said, multiple coaches. Doc, as he's told us many times, took over midseason, very difficult thing to do.
Hardest thing ever to do in the history of sports.
How could anyone possibly overcome it? Damian Lillard, to be fair, has been going through a lot personally and professionally this season. Chris Middleton missed almost 30 games. All those things are completely real and completely valid. And I have to say, too, from the time Damian Lillard joined the Bucks, the most likely outcome was they were not going to have enough this season. They just lost a lot of their playoff rotation from the year before. They didn't have much of a supporting cast. And the guys that they did have, especially Brooke and Chris Middleton, are older to the point that they're injury risks. So it looked like the kind of team that was going to take not only time to get used to each other, and we've seen that, but time to just get another offseason, to get another exception guy, check another free agent market and get a little bit more help on the kind of on the edges of their roster, to be honest with you, because the core four guys are good and they're good together, but they don't have enough right now. And that's really clear when Giannis is out.
See, I wonder if their window was 21 when they won the finals, and then 22 when they threw away the 1 seed because they didn't want to play Brooklyn, which was dumb when it was happening. I was on the record at the time. Like, I always want home court. That's why I love what the Knicks did. I just always want home court. You're going to have to play whoever anyway. To assume you're just going to be able to duck teams is crazy. They throw it away. Game 7's in Boston. Grant Williams hits 133s. Peyton Pritchard hits some threes. Milwaukee loses. But, Milwaukee was really good that year, and I think they would have beaten Golden State. But maybe that was their window, that little stretch with the team they had. I thought Middleton looked pretty old in that Orlando game. And I know his stats have been okay, but he seems like he's shifted to a slightly different point of his career. Their wings are just super slow, and the Dame defense piece, and there's just a lot of ways to attack them. I don't see it with them.
Yeah. Just thinking about all those guys trying to keep up with the screening of the Pacers in transition, and that's step one. Like, can you even get through that to make that a competitive series and to fight your way through it? And even if you can do that, how are you going to get through multiple series with this roster? And with Giannis, who, like, he plays through injury, he comes back relatively quickly, historically speaking. But how could something like a calf injury not be at the back of your mind when you move the way Giannis moves and you run the floor the way he does, and your game is predicated on attacking headlong and getting vertical and like exploding to the basket on both sides of the ball? So I just don't see how that makes sense in terms of a long playoff run. It doesn't really add up to me.
Rick Carlisle against Doc, 2005. It was the Artest Melee year and somehow beat the Celtics in 7 and won Game 7 in Boston, but it's not historically been an awesome matchup.
No.
What happens if Cleveland flops in round 1? I think this one's the easiest one to answer of all the what happens.
Well, I think people start losing their jobs or their spots on the team, for one. I think
there's a coaching change.
JB Bickerstaff, that conversation will be had. To whatever extent Donovan Mitchell has a future as a Cavalier right now, I would think it would change pretty quickly and he would be out sooner than later. And honestly, you probably see a Jared Allen change too, or some clarity as far as their front court. I think it would be the kind of thing where you turn the page from this version of the Cavs competing for playoff spots, trying to fight for home court positioning in the playoffs, to the Darius Garland, Evan Mobley Cavaliers, featuring what else you can scrape together. That
with some shooters and whatever. Yeah, I agree.
I just think if they lose, and especially if they lose in an embarrassing fashion, and that's what it would be, not because Orlando is bad, but because the way Orlando would beat them would be very reminiscent of how the Cavs lost to the Knicks a year ago. If that happens, there's no delusion where you can talk yourself into the idea that everything's okay, right? Like the NBA runs on that kind of like plausible deniability and people convincing their bosses that they should come back for one more year to try again. But there's no talking anyone into that at that point.
I, for one, am very excited to watch the Cavaliers next year with Garland, Mobley, Tyler Hero, Jaime Jaquez, Max Strus.
Yeah.
And head coach Mike Budenholzer. Sounds great.
Wow. Yeah. Nikola Jovic, like sixth man of the year.
Nikola Jovic, it looks awesome. Oh, this is a good one. What happens if Luka beats the Joker in round 2? He just big boys the series, and he's the best player in the series, and he knocks Denver out, the defending champs.
It would have to be the conference finals, right?
Round 3. Sorry.
This is a little reductive, and maybe this is my ESPN FS1 take of the day, but if Luka goes on that kind of run, I think he has a very credible argument to be the best player in the world at that point, right? There's a baton passing that would happen in that situation, given just like looking at the rosters, looking at the matchup. That is a series the Nuggets should win. And if they do not, it will be because Luka took it to them and dismantled them and really attacked their team in a way that no one else has been able to do. And so that kind of path to me would signal that Luka is, if not the best player in the world, then at least tied for the best player in the world.
As the official custodian of the best player alive championship belt, if Luka beats Denver in round 3, he's holding the belt up at the end.
All right.
It might not be fair, but
that's what it is.
It's just how it goes, man. If that's how you win the championship of whatever. You win the series. And I still think Jokic is the best player in the world. But if Luka outplays him in a series and takes it, then that's it. That's the reality we live in.
How do you secure the belt? Do you have it like in a briefcase handcuffed to your wrist at all times? You're just like ready to move it to the next person when necessary?
The Stanley Cup has a guy that just travels with it. It's the same thing for us. We just have a guy who he's with it. He goes, he brings it around to different parts of the country.
What a job.
This is a good one. What happens if the Knicks beat the Celtics in round 3? I was trying to think of the highest end, holy shit moment for two fan bases that could happen in the playoffs, and I think this is it. The Knicks, the downtrodden, terrible, just laughing stock of the 21st century Knicks, getting their shit together, beating Boston, which they did in 1973 and they did in 1990. And I think those were the only 2 times that ever happened. And the Knicks beat the Celtics and go to the finals. That's our highest end, holy shit moment that could happen, I think, in these playoffs, right? Or am I wrong?
That would be huge. I mean, really, the Celtics losing at any point before the finals would be a pretty big holy shit moment. I just don't think anyone in the East is really equipped to put up that much of a fight against them at this stage. But I think you have to walk us through this one. Like your nightmare dreamscape, if the Celtics lose to the Knicks, like what does that look like to you? What has to even happen for that to turn out that way?
So it's funny. There's no Celtics-Knicks rivalry at all because the Celtics used to just always kill the Knicks, right? Except for a very small window after Russell retired. But Russell, I remember when I spent time with him in 2012 when we asked, like, what was the Knicks rivalry like? And he was like, it wasn't a rivalry. We beat them every year. They never beat us ever. There was no rivalry. It's like, all right, that's fair. So it was that 5-year stretch, and that's really it. the 84 East Finals, Bird versus Bernard. That was big.
Mm.
But they were just never good at the same time. If the Knicks beat the Celtics, I would take so much shit from all the New York people in my life. Like my mind goes there because I'm selfish.
Yes. You have to block some numbers, I would think.
But I think the craziest thing about it would be that the Knicks did it without doing the all-in crazy trade with all their assets.
Yeah.
That would be the nutty part. I mean, forget about how weird it would be to make the finals without Randall, but to do it without doing your all-in Anthony Davis to the Lakers type of trade and still have the picks and the assets. Like, to me, it's like, if the Knicks make round 3, even if they lose to the Celtics, but they set up this whole foundation, but they still have the assets they have going forward, they've established themselves as, it's cool to play for the Knicks again. This whole era of KD and Kyrie going to New York and not playing for the Knicks, like that era is over. So even that's a win, but them beating the Celtics would be unbelievable. I mean, that would be one of the greatest series in the history of the Knicks franchise. If they
It would have to be. And while we're printing Knicks propaganda here, I mean, even just getting to the conference finals, there's a path there that makes a lot of sense, right? You're matching up with an injured Joel Embiid right out of the gate, either an injured Giannis, as we said, or a young Pacers team that's going to be pretty beatable if you're the Knicks, I would think. And before you know it, like Dante DiVincenzo is going wild in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like it can happen very quickly given how good the Knicks are. So the fact that they can get there is very impressive. And as you said, if they win, if they do make it to the finals, that's a banner season. Even if they lose to the Knicks in the conference finals, it makes a great case to the big fish stars you're talking about. If you're Joel Embiid, if you're anyone else, the idea of putting a team like New York over the hump, who couldn't quite get past Boston, is going to be very attractive. So long as they can get through those first 2 rounds relatively unscathed, then that's always a bit of a variable with the Tom Thibodeau team. And OG Anunoby is already dinged up as it is. They just got to get through these things relatively healthy. But if they can, they're in a position to really either do something remarkable now or do something even more remarkable later.
Yeah. I mean, they were built with the motto in mind was the 04 Pistons. And, Brunson's a better scorer than anyone the 04 Pistons had. But same kind of mentality, like
close.
A tough team that made smart decisions at the end of games and was flexible on defense. They don't have the size the Pistons had, but I think the type of players that they went and found, very similar to that team. Like just certain type of warriors who just showed up tough, played really well together, which is, I think, another thing they have. So
absolutely,
it's different, but it's not completely different.
Is it blasphemous? Like, I think Jalen Brunson right now is better than Chauncey Billups ever was. As far as that
question.
Like
Chauncey
04
was
model?
like a 20 points a game guy. I mean, it was different. Like if you put that Pistons team in the way basketball's played now, I think some stats would go up. That was really like the dregs of society or NBA society.
Well, maybe society too.
Maybe
was a dark time.
There was some 67, 64 playoff games.
Oof.
2 more. What happens if Phoenix or Minnesota, pick one, lose round 1? In other words, what loss would have more dramatic changes if you had between those two? Phoenix loses in round 1, what happens? Minnesota loses in round 1, what happens? We talked about not positive Towns is back. If Minnesota just loses round 1, maybe that's when they play the card.
Yeah.
But what happens to Phoenix if now they're favored and then all of a sudden Minnesota beats them? What do? How do you talk yourself into next season?
What can you do? You literally can't trade Bradley Beal. You're not going to trade Devin Booker. And unless Kevin Durant wants out, you're not trading him. And I would hope he wouldn't so quickly, even after something like that.
Sadly, you didn't mention the coach yet, which is usually after you've listed all the players that are still in the same spot. Then you're like, the coach. And then all of a sudden the coach is like, wait, I'm fired?
Yeah. But an inconsistent execution team with bad fourth quarter performance, that's a lot pointing to Frank Vogel. That's the way these things go. That gives you all the cover you need, all the reason you need. Is there reason enough to think that this team would be dramatically different next year? I don't think so. What they still do need, despite all the protests, like some supplementary ball handling, some playmaking. I think that stuff is meaningful for them even now. They need more bench guys they can actually count on versus the kind of roulette wheel that they spin from night to night. Like Grayson Allen's been great, like extending him. I think that's a nice move for them.
They had to do that.
But they still need more guys that they can actually trust. And so the number of changes they could actually make would be a coaching change and then some supporting cast changes. But the stars would not change in the way that they might for Minnesota. Because I agree with you, Cat, if Minnesota loses, it's because they won't have enough offense. And if they don't have enough offense, you're looking at your $50 million power forward who's supposed to supply it, in addition to Anthony Edwards, obviously. But you're going to look at him a certain way and wonder, is this really the best use of our cap resources when we have so much invested between Gobert and Cat and Naz Reid? Like, something has to give at some point.
Yeah, and they've been there before with Cat too. So if the series goes badly, it won't be the first time they've kind of looked side-eyed at Cat. All right, bonus question. What happens if James Harden absolutely sucks against Dallas?
What happens is he sucks and then still gets a gigantic contract.
Oh, my God. The Clipper fans in my life didn't want to hear that.
I'm sorry.
So you think he's getting paid either way?
I think he's getting paid either way. I think it is.
Oof.
There is a mutual understanding as far as how that stuff will go. And that's where it gets dark. You know, if they lose and James Harden is bad, maybe Paul George leaves, and then you're left holding the bag with this team, and you're opening up your new building with a starting lineup of Harden and Terrence Mann and Norm Powell and Amir Coffey, because Kawhi is sitting out the beginning of the season to nurse back from the injury that ended his previous season, and Ivica Zubac.
Yikes.
Big time yikes.
Here's our new arena.
Yep. Buy your season tickets today.
Yeah, so part of me wonders if they'd just never made the Harden trade, what does this team look like right now? What seed would they have been in?
Yeah. I think they would be worse by seeding, at least.
Yeah, they'd probably they did win like 52 games. They did hit, or 51. They hit a couple highs. Yeah, because there's one of the reasons Dallas versus Phoenix is, Dallas versus the Clippers is so fun. It's also like all these like late 2000s, early 2010s draft pick guys. There's a generation of those dudes, right? Like Kyrie, George, Kawhi, Harden, Westbrook. Yep. They're all kind of in this cluster. None of them are as good as they were, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, but they're all still pretty relevant. And all of them could kind of steal the series, which is another crazy thing. And I include Westbrook in that, because if Kawhi gets hurt, I think we're going to see a lot of Russell Westbrook in this series. And he's had a good season. Like, I do think he's the kind of guy that could shift the energy of a series like this. But Harden's the one where if Kawhi ends up not playing that much and it's like, hey, James, what do you got? It could be a fucking disaster, or he could have a couple of the games like he had last year in the Celtics series where he looks like he's the best player on earth for 2 hours.
Yeah, I think it's going to edge, maybe not fucking disaster.
The ugly.
Yeah, but in that direction. He does feel like he's a bit at that stage. And it's similar to what we were talking about with Chris Middleton earlier, where when everyone's healthy, a third option Chris Middleton looks pretty good. Yeah. But you lose Giannis and you want him to do more, and it's just not there. Like, the capacity to create in pressure against primary defensive assignments is just not happening for him. That's kind of what I see with Harden. Like, he just doesn't get to the basket consistently enough. The foul drawing is obviously winnowed off for him as a result. He has a very either step back or great pass oriented game. And he's smart enough and savvy enough to make that work most of the time. But it works primarily when he's a third or fourth option on the floor. Like, that's when he's most comfortable at this point. He's told us he wants to be a facilitator, and we probably should take him at his word, because that's what he's best at right now.
Well, and especially you're playing the same team for 2 straight weeks. They start getting used to stuff. I'll be interested to see how the playoff games are called. There was some tiny signs that they were loosening up the reins a little bit on some of the foul stuff. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. Yeah, it's like what happened with Klay Thompson when you talk about Harden. It made me think of that. Like,
oof.
It's at a different point of your career. We're going to talk about Klay with Logan in a second. We were going to pour one out for the Warriors. I know you talked about it on the Ringer NBA show, but Rob Mahoney, I think I'm like a 9 out of 10 for these playoffs.
There's so much to love.
So many storylines, so many good players. I'm just delighted.
Even the worst series are going to be either super watchable or they're going to be kind of rock fight endearing. I think there's going to be a lot to watch. There's going to be a lot to dig into. This opening weekend of the playoffs is my favorite sporting event of the year. So I'm looking forward to being in the muck with it.
Yeah, the worst series is probably going to be Celtics Chicago or Celtics versus no Jimmy Butler Miami.
Yeah.
Then if you go second worst series, I kind of like all the series. Like Orlando Cleveland is probably going to get the most NBA TV time. Sorry, Cerruti. But I can't wait to watch that series, and I can't wait to see, some of the moves Orlando makes. We'll see what they got.